Hey guys, what's up? Lewin here at GarageBand and Beyond. Welcome back. So today I'm going to be talking about the general theory and principles of EQing, and not like a specific frequencies for specific instruments or anything like that. Just general theories, and I'm going to try to keep it quick. And then also show you the plugins that I'm using lately that I think are really helpful for getting good tones. And hopefully there's some, toys in there for you to look at. First thing I want to talk about, which I think is hands down the most important thing for EQing, is something called EQing from the source. And what that really means is, number one, having a very clear mental concept of what you want whatever instrument you're recording to sound like. So, if you're recording an acoustic guitar that is going to be part of a huge overall band mix, you really need to have some idea of what you want that guitar to sound like later on in the final mix. Also includes choosing the right microphone, choosing the right position in your room, right miking position on the instrument. Hopefully you're also recording a tonally balanced instrument and it's being played by a skilled musician who practices a lot and is putting on a good performance for you that day in the studio. These things are going to make a humongous difference in your life when you get to the mix stage. Don't be lazy. Like, if you don't hear it right out of the gate, like if you get back to your headphones or your monitors or whatever and you're like, oh, that does not sound right to me, but we'll fix it later with EQing. Don't do that. Switch the microphone, switch the instrument, switch positions, do the work then, because it will just make your lives so much easier when you actually get to the mix stage. So the more EQing from the source you can do, the better off you'll be. There's lots of pros out there who don't, who swear by that method and don't even EQ in the mix stage. They'll use compression and stuff like that, effects and things like that, but they will not actually EQ. And there's lots of guys out there who do that. So it's a good way to go. Now, that all being said, I'm going to show you one of my plugins or presets that I've created, like when you're talking about the things that you can save here in GarageBand. You can see this is actually what I call recording track 1. And it has a bunch of really good stuff in it. And I'm just going to show you, this is what I'm using these days. And so the very first thing is the Slate Digital Virtual Channel. I've made videos on this. Awesome thing. Love it. Non-essential. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. Signal path that you should be using, though, that I highly recommend is this. Compressor first, effects second, and then the EQ will actually be the very last thing in your row. You know what I mean? And the reason I do that is, instead of like having the EQ first, is because like a lot of times you'll subtractive EQ the hell out of something. Like you'll be like, oh, I've notched all the frequencies I don't like out of this sound. Then you apply your compressor to it and suddenly the compressor reboosts all those sounds and your tone has totally changed. I mean, of course it depends on the compressor that you're using. But anyway, so that's why I go compressor first, effect second, and EQ dead last in the signal path. Now, I want to show you this EQ that I'm using today, and I've been using this a lot. It's a really, really great EQ. This is the PSP MIC-Q, so it's like capital M, lowercase c, capital Q. MIC-Q. The thing that I really love about this, not only is it, a great sounding, very transparent sounding EQ, it's not really heavy. Even if you dial it in heavy, it never is overbearing or anything like that, which I really love. But it also has a low and high pass filter on it. So even though I'm totally, slammed out, I'm totally maxed out on plugins here. You can only use these 4 or add in these 4. This gives you a low and a high pass filter, which is a really, really nice option to have, I think. Now, I'm just going to let you hear it because I use this a lot. And like, this is, this is Walking in a Winter Wonderland, my Christmas song that I released for you guys. Actually, what I like on here is Rhythm Guitar 1. So here's what it sounds like, just so you can hear it. Okay, Okay, so that's just that. That's just a little example of what that thing sounds like. If you're doing big band mixes, one of the things that I think is most essential to get right, besides the acoustic guitars and all that, of course, is one of the things that really helps a recording sound right or wrong is the bass guitar. So here's what I'm using on my bass guitars these days, just so you guys have an idea, because I think it's sounding pretty good these days. Here's what it sounds like. I think I could not have found a more boring passage to listen to. Here, let's listen to the whole thing. Okay, so pretty simple bass tone, but a good one. I've always been pretty happy with this one. Right, so you can hear that it's actually pretty heavily compressed. This compressor right here is something that I really, really recommend that all of you buy if you have the money, and if you don't, save up and buy this suite from Focusrite. It's the Scarlet plugin suite from Focusrite. I believe it's around $149. Comes with this compressor, which I totally love. The Scarlet Compressor comes with a reverb and what's the other one? A noise gate. And there might be a fourth one, but I can't remember off the top of my head if there is or not. But anyway, check it out. Focusrite.com. Scarlet plugin suite, I think is what it's called. But this thing is awesome. This is a very, very good compressor that you can really squish things down with. Especially, like a bass tone, you can really hammer it, but it never becomes like overly compressed. Like you can really dial this thing in to where it's compressing it heavily, but you do not hear it. So I love this compressor. And then also I wanted to show you here's my EQ settings. Pretty simple for my bass amp setting in here. And I just go direct from my bass to my Focusrite preamp. And I usually use, the Studio Direct Box Warm. Studio Direct Box Warm. Anyway. And then, of course, I'm always going to use a little bit of the bass reducer. And I have this set to 51 hertz. Now, there's something way too specific. The general theories for EQing are, less is more. Of course, when you're adding things on, you just want to put on just a little bit. If there's tones you don't like, you definitely are going to be notching those out, but you don't want to take like a big wide spread. So you don't want to use like the visual EQ to notch things out because, it takes a pretty gigantic sweep out of it and there's not much you can do to like narrow it down. See, it's like, it just doesn't happen. You don't use the visual EQ on GarageBand. If you really need to notch something out, just use there are notch filters. But there are also like the parametric EQ is like a good thing to use. Look at this, because you can do that and then you can widen it or really narrow it out. So this parametric EQ is a really good thing to use. And again, when you're trying to notch out sounds that you don't like, be minimal about it and listen to it, and it's always good to sort of like remove your ears from the thing. If you've been sitting there like trying to notch out a frequency you don't like, and if you've been doing it for too long, it's really good to like gain perspective by listening to either a whole other song or just leaving the room and giving your ears a break and then coming back and listening to it again, because getting rid of obnoxious tones is like one of those things that you can sit there and like slave for like hours and hours, and then you come back the next day and you're just like, oh, all the life has been sucked out of my recording because I over EQ'd it, So there's that. So you're going to be notching out, specific frequencies. If you don't like them, notch them out using the parametric EQ. And then again, when you start boosting things, just boost them a little bit. If you're like going really heavy and you see humongous moves on your EQs, you're probably doing the wrong thing. It really does benefit you to do as much of that EQing from the source as possible. The last thing that I wanted to add is something called masking EQing. And masking is really like if you're using like a direct guitar sound or something and you're like, oh, it's too brittle and it's too bright, and you use a filter to shave off all the high end of it, and then you're like, oh, but now it just sounds muddy, and you start dialing it back in and it just never sounds right. Masking EQ would mean like there's too much high end here, but you can't get rid of it, or you don't like the way it sounds. So what you would actually do is boost the low end to mask over the high end. What happens is a lot of those like low end frequencies will just sort of sonically just sort of spill over the high end, and it just sort of, you know, gives it a different quality, and it makes it sound, you know, hopefully more like what you want it to sound like. So that's pretty much it, you guys. I know this is sort of scattered. I've actually made this video about 50 times now, and I'm trying to reduce it down to just a 10-minute video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will answer them as much as I can. And just remember, EQ from the source and minimal moves in the mixing stage, and minimal moves in the mixing stage. Okay? Talk to you guys later. Have a good day.